a little like, really, guys? But, you know. David's on his way down.
Good. Wherever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah, so we got the. And this is just the.
Eric, if you don't want to turn around, look at the screen that's right there for you too.
Listen, PowerPoint is not my first language, so the things go amiss.
No problem. This water for you.
Thank you.
Emotional voice.
Oh.
Mic'd up.
Oh, okay.
Because it you might not need it for the room, but for the video.
Sure. And I can move around.
Absolutely, yep. You can just put it in your pocket, put it out.
Tell me if I'm tired. Throat.
You're good. So then just flip that to on once you get started, and you should be all set. And then as far as PowerPoint goes, you can just.
I'm unaligned. Sorry. It's okay. I did it myself. Don't.
Yes, just forward arrow here, through, and then back here, just exactly. Yeah, if you want to point to something, there's a laser pointer.
I don't.
Fair enough.
Or I would if I did this more often. But I actually prefer to talk.
Yeah, no problem.
I hate this stuff, but it's now required.
Well, people are pretty used to it.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, so you got.
I think I already invited the ones. And I'm thinking,
I know, you're like, oh, hey. Yeah, so that is the projector image of this. So you may want to stay. They've got so the camera for videotaping off to the left there. They'll go ahead and follow the center of the image to get started. So if you sort of just stay in the general lectern area, you're fine.
Can I walk over?
Yeah, you can come out.
Roam as freely as you want. Right?
You'll see a lot.
Thank you. Really, this is great. So this is your second. Obviously, I'm just you're the editor in chief. Yeah. I have all
And the instructions.
editor in chief of ALA.
Now every meeting is
Aren't they always? And then as far as feedback goes, you know, go through your presentation talk. If you want to at the end, try to leave 15 minutes for that. If you want people
You can also offer people to interrupt you if you want, whichever feels better.
I'm completely comfortable with people.
Yeah, so just
You can tell that they usually don't anyway, but you know.
he's on one.
So.
Yeah,
because classes. So the one good thing, and this is actually, we hadn't done this until, I don't know, 5 years ago. There is now a common wish period for all students. So there are no classes between 12 and 1. And, but that means lots of classes start right at 1 o'clock, which is really fun, because I have to duck out a few minutes early. But I'm really glad we had a chance to talk. I'm really excited about the new units. Hi. Well, that means the good thing is the new users are the old users, so that it's not something that you're really jumping out of here about. And you get to stay in your, I take it you live in a lovely townhouse in Brooklyn or something.
Yes,
and, you know, so you get to stay there, and that's a good thing.
If you ever need space, we have this empty floor. When Anthony's not there, you're welcome to it.
That's very nice. And I will, by the way, connect you with Dave Trubeck. I think that would, he'd enjoy that. And I think he's right down there by Grand RV Plaza.
Right, and we're 5 minutes from there. We exchanged some emails, and I think he got the ball in my court last spring, and then I got busy, and it's
believe me, these things we completely understand. Oh, it's just because I get your right. So yeah, you don't have to stand staring at them if you don't want to.
I'm going to take that.
Yeah, this is just, this time of year is always crazy because everything is now beginning to race forward. Holidays are coming, the end of the semester. And yeah, it's amazing. Believe me, of course, for me, probably you have to watch like your kids, your friends, and stuff. Because you start saying things that, you know, I made you realize they weren't born. You know, when these major life events, which you think have defined your world, happens. You know.
First I was on the job. Man came to make an offer and said, and I looked at the guy and I realized he didn't know who I should
Right. That's the scary part.
How could that be? But welcome to the new world.
Yeah, welcome to the new world. So, luckily, see if you have kids late in the kids department. So I have a 13-year-old. So therefore, you know, like I know who Avril Lavigne is, and you know, I mean, there are a lot of things that I know. Hi there. How are you? Do you know?
Hi. I just wanted to say hello.
Yes.
So nice to see you. I wish I could stay for a time. Just say hello.
Congratulations on your new church. It was a great thing. Nick was joking, but it was a great thing to do. I think I had the easiest email in the world to find. I think at one point I went looking for it.
Oh no!
Yes, well,
I have his, so if you don't, yeah, so that you guys can connect.
Yeah, no, it's great to be
Hi
here.
there.
Yeah, so you're doing well? Okay,
Just want to say, so this is Lisa Dealey. She's our wonderful public interest law
Hi. Nice to meet you.
She runs all our pro bono stuff. It's fantastic. So,
please keep it going.
we need it. We need it.
Yeah, we definitely. So for you to come over and play out.
Flying to Rio.
They're rough. I would really love to sit down and just so we'll climb it tonight. All right,
Great to see you.
Thanks, Lisa. See you. Okay, why don't we get started? For those of you who don't know, I'm David Wilkins. I'm the director of the Center on the Legal Profession. This is our weekly, oh wow, dropping stuff, weekly gathering here that we do bringing what we think are the most interesting people thinking and working around the legal profession and its future. And none of them, quite frankly, I shouldn't say none of them are all insult people who've already been here, but very few of them have the insight that our speaker Aric Press has. I think Aric has had one of the most unique vantage points to think about what's happening in the legal services industry, not just here, but globally. Aric is, I'm going to read this, the Senior Vice President, Editor-in-Chief of ALM Media, which is the parent company of the American Lawyer, but also the National Law Journal, Corporate Counsel Magazine, most of the other important publications around changes in the legal profession. He's a lifelong career as a journalist. He worked at Newsweek before coming to ALM. But he's, even more importantly, I think he's one of the most thoughtful observers around what's been going on and what's likely to happen in the future. So he's agreed to come and talk to us about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to sing or not, but
No.
all right. But he'll be well worth listening to. So thank you very much, Aric Press.
Thank you very much, David. I apologize, English is my first language, PowerPoint is not, and so I'm going to struggle a little with this. I do it a lot, but it's never been completely comfortable with me, so I'll do the very best that I can. Two things I would just like to say. One, I'm pleased to be in the Wasserstein building. The reason that I'm here and the reason I know about what I know about is because of Bruce, who gave the money in his father's name. He hired me 16 years ago to come to American Lawyer and try to understand both how to revive the magazine and secondly, figure out what was happening in the profession. It had the side benefit of all those people I sat behind in law school all of a sudden found my phone number and called me up, and it was a great series of reunions for a couple of years. The other reason is that strictly private. My father-in-law taught here at Harvard Law School for 39 years, and he would be hugely amused at the thought that any tenured faculty would deign to give me a lectern at his law school. But a wonderful man, deeply missed. Yes, it does work. So I have 4 points. I have much too much information to go over with you today. And I apologize for that. Partly I'm an enthusiast and partly every man needs an editor. And I didn't have one on this. So I'm going to go through these 4 points in some varying degrees of detail. I want you to know that obviously I'm a boss. I've been a boss for a long time, but I'm also a parent. And so I am completely comfortable with being interrupted. Do not hesitate. Also, I'm completely comfortable with being told that I obviously don't know what I'm talking about. So it's not a problem. I won't take it personally. Feel free to have at me. I also want you to know that I'm rooting for you. Most of you are what, 1 and 2 L's, 3 L's? Right. 2 of my 3 children are practicing lawyers. One is 5 years into a great public service career in New York City. The other is a 3rd year at a gigantic global law firm. I think there's a future for all of this, and I feel some of your pain, particularly those few of you who might have student loans. I understand. Hi, welcome. So, where are we now? Just to give you a brief synopsis for those of you who will be leaving in the next few minutes, so you have something to walk away with. In my view, the state of the big law firm market, and I define the big law firm market as essentially the AmLaw American Lawyer 200, which is the 200 top grossing firms in the country, or the National Law Journal 350, which is a census, the 350 largest law firms in the country. What is the state of play for them? They are under stress. They are changing, but not yet changed. They are facing unrelenting and, in my opinion, irreversible pressures on their cost structures. But I think it's, and people who know me well would be surprised by this, I feel very optimistic about law firms in general, just not every law firm. There are going to be casualties. There have been some already, some spectacular ones. As a journalist, I wake up every morning thanking God for human weakness. That's true in great law firms as well. It gives us all something to do and gives you all something to write about. But basically, I'm optimistic about the future. And there's a part of me that's tempted to say, well, thank you all very much. And leave. There's this old joke about standing in front of a room full of millionaires or people who are on their way to become millionaires to criticize their business plans. But that's a portion of what I'm going to be doing in the next 45 or 50 minutes. I'm also going to caution you about the fact that you're entering a world that you may or may not know very much about, but it's a world that's going to largely be afflicted by new challenges that will be outside the control of lawyers and the people running their businesses. And if there's one thing that lawyers like, it's to be in control. So those of you who have the emotional wherewithal to enjoy out-of-control situations, it's going to be a wonderful career for you in the future. Those of you who don't, well, there's always dental school. Remember, I'm the optimist. So we're number one. One thing that you all need to remember going forward, where you'll all, in one form or another, be practicing globally, I suppose, is that this is the largest legal market that God has ever created, and likely to remain that into the future. It's divided loosely into the private practice into three broad segments. Actually, the largest segment is solo practitioners. There aren't many of you who will end up doing that, or many alums who are in that world. There's big law, medium law, small law. Most people who start in big law end up in medium law or in small law. Here's something harsh that I'm going to say to you so that one of your professors doesn't have to say it. Grows out of a conversation I had with one of your colleagues earlier today. None of you, or at least few of you, have ever experienced failure, right? You wouldn't be at Harvard Law School if you had experienced a whole lot of failure along the way. Well, when you get out of here and you go into big law, you're about to experience failure. Because by definition, to succeed at big law means to rise all the way into the partnership. Can't do it. The places are dependent on most people not making it. So, in addition to uncertainty and being out of control, get ready for failure. Sorry.
So far, you're off to a good start.
I'm off to a good start. And remember, I'm the optimist. Right. Although empowered, understand this, go out there and talk to these people as adults. Look them in the eye. Hi, Betsy. Look them in the eye and behave as though you're an adult, that you know what you're doing, and that you're not afraid of failure, because all of them still are. Okay, so a little bit of history. This is courtesy of my friend Bill Henderson. There's no S at the end of university, who's a teacher at Indiana, and after David, one of the leading experts on the American legal profession. What you see here is, well, you can read it for yourself. This is the almost exponential growth, expenditures on legal services between the end of the Carter administration and the middle of the second Bush administration. Nice. This is what all the partners you're about to join grew up with. There's nothing surprising about this to them. This is the way life is and is supposed to be. It's guaranteed. Many of you don't know this, but this is the 11th commandment that Moses got on Sinai, that spending on legal services will forever increase. Look at the rewards that happened over this period. Some of you may remember Barack Obama, right? You don't know exactly what happened to him after he left Harvard Law School. Had he decided to stay at Sidley in Austin, not only would he be making what you see here, but he wouldn't have the privilege of dealing with John Boehner. So that increased 3 times the rate of inflation. And then, Hemingway, the earth moved, the music stopped, the work slowed dramatically with the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. Understand that it didn't stop entirely like blood, law never sleeps. But just by way of comparison, from 2000 to 2008, revenues up 105%. From 2008 to 2012, revenues up by 12%. During the boom, costs at law firms went up, interestingly enough, by 107% by our stats. Costs went up by 107% while revenues were going up by 105%. Those of you who think that law firms are not a business, well, there's reason maybe for you to think that. Just a little joke, just seeing if you're paying attention. During the last 4 years, costs at law firms increased by a mere 9%. So what happened? In one sentence, clients began to awake to the fact that they needed to match up, at least in terms of big law firms, much more carefully than they ever had before, which lawyers they need with which tasks they need to get solved. That led them to, in some cases, reduce the number of law firms they needed. They used, in other cases, to increase the number of law firms they used. Still, in other cases, to bring more work inside. At least three different possible situations I've described. There are a dozen more. Be very cautious around people who tell you that this is the way the market is moving. Well, parts of the market are moving in this direction, and part of the market is moving in another direction. To contradict myself now, the one thing that I think is quite clear is that whether they're using more or fewer lawyers, higher priced or cheaper lawyers, they're trying to decide which law firms they can afford for which purposes. This is a bit of a revolution, because in the years before that, during the boom times, if there were good relations between law firms and clients, the clients would turn to very expensive law firms for work that they didn't need them to do. Not every job requires a brain surgeon, and not every lawyer needs to be paid like a brain surgeon, or the way brain surgeons once were paid. So, 4 important trends that I'm going to go over with you over the next few minutes, which, if they continue, will add up to being secular changes that you're all going to have to deal with over the course of your careers. I hesitate yet to say that they are secular, because these are all post-Lehman Brothers, but they're pretty consistent, and I think tending towards the irrevocable, but I think we might want to wait a few more years to see for sure. But you need to know about these things. The first, we'll start with legal spending by business. A researcher we now employ went looking to understand what the size of the legal market in this country is. Apart from being number one, we don't know very much with any precision about just what the size of it was. And she came across these remarkable studies, which I wish I had seen a decade ago, that are based on census interviews quarterly, that are seriously reviewed annually and then every 5 years, that tells you that the size of the legal market is essentially $255 billion in this country, and that business, in one form or another, spends about 2/3 of that. Fine. Now the story of the last 6 years in 2 charts. Between 04 and 08, spending went up by 9.8%. Then the Great Recession hits. And by the way, if any of you want any of these charts for any reason, I'm more than happy to share it with you afterwards, or Nathan can give it to you. So 9.8% increase between 04 and 08, and then between 2010 and 2013, it looks like a nice little recovery, only 4.6%, but it's beginning to come back. All of this based on quite reliable Census Bureau surveying. What I never thought to do, but which is economics trained researcher did, and my jaw dropped, was to take these numbers and put them against inflation adjusted.
So Aric, you're 1 slide behind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
That's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just blew. Now you tell me, David. Okay. So look at this inflation-adjusted business legal services revenue. Nathan told me that there's a laser. I told him I wouldn't need it. I'm going to use my finger. 159.4 billion, 118.3 billion, roughly 25% down. If you don't have an appetite, let's see, what was it? If you don't have an appetite for not being in control and not being afraid, if you also don't like entering a competitive market, that dental school option is pretty good, because this is what the law firms of the country are facing, the big ones. So law firms outperformed the broader economy until 08 and 09 considerably, and since then have lagged behind. This tells you, 1, something about the way law firms are, 2, that lawyers and their institutions are lagging economic indicators. What happens in a market where demand is down and supply is up? I'm not sure this is great PowerPoint technique, but it seemed like a useful way to do it. What happens? Prices, right? Welcome to the land you're about to enter. Now, of course, these are posted prices, and everybody knows that there's been no end to discounting and that clients are driving all kinds of hard bargains and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, these are not my figures. They're figures that come from other reputable sources. According to the billing records and the Corporate Executive Board and Thomson Reuters Peer Monitor, all perfectly reputable folks, estimates are varying between 2.9 and 7.1%, depending on the year, practice, and sample, increases in actual hourly rates that are paid. So at a time when there's increasing cost pressure, prices continue to rise, and clients, for all the talk, continue to pay more. They're paying more for fewer hours, but they're paying more. Now, none of this is to say that clients are being entirely passive. This is a chart about the percentage of clients, corporate counsel, that pay outside counsel with alternate fee arrangements, AFAs. Just a fancy way of saying paying on a non-billable basis. By 2013, we were up over 80%. Pay at least one or more of their outside counsel in some non-billable way. By our estimates and the estimates of the Timetrics Billing House, it's roughly 25% at the most of legal bills that are now operating on a non-billable way and that's all. So for all the talk you may hear in your first year property classes about the death of the billable hour, just another bad attempt at a joke, hasn't happened, may yet happen in your lifetimes, but not yet. So here's some good news. While the market has contracted, big firms have actually increased their share of the business market. What we did was we ran a series of estimates, and we're doing estimates on estimates here. We tried to figure out what percentage of the AmLaw 200 lawyers spend the bulk of their time on domestic work, and then compared that to the gross revenues of the AmLaw 200. And what we came up with was an estimate that shows in blue what share of the overall legal spending in the US goes to the 200 largest firms and what goes to everyone else. And it moves from 34% to 46% to 3 years in a row of 47% of the spend. Now again, it's an estimate on an estimate, may or may not survive cross-examination. It's quite a remarkable success story. 200 law firms, 10% of the private practitioners in the country taking in 47% of business spend. Just remarkable. Yes, please.
With all of the consolidation of these firms, the biggest 200 have gotten a lot bigger. So how much more of the population of lawyers is accounting for this increase from 34 to 47%?
It's a very fair question, and the answer is some of it, but not as much as I can't answer precisely because it's not a question I thought to ask my researcher. Certainly some of it. The question going forward, to pivot off it, is how much bigger can they get in order to increase their market share? Have they hit a natural plateau where they're stuck? I mean, stuck at an enviable level, but can they get above 50%? Can they get to, actually kind of hard to imagine, but
so my guess is, whatever the answer is to that second question,
right.
Remember that the legal profession is still growing during this time. So even though the average size of an AmLaw 200 firm has gone from whatever it was, 150 to 200 to 250, my guess is this is much more of a function of another thing that's happening, which is business in general is capturing a larger and larger percentage of the total legal expenditure and the total legal effort. And so that's been a long-term trend, like for the last 20 or 25 years. You know, whether or not there's a natural size for the size of the biggest law firms depends upon things like conflicts, rules, management, the preferences of clients, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, one thing I can tell you, and I'll come to this in a moment, is that between 2008 and 2013, the lawyer population of the 194 law firms in the AmLaw 200 who are not Verine firms. Verine are these global confederations. They're outsized and they skew all the other numbers. But in those 194 firms, total population of lawyers grew by essentially 1,800. So not much growth. And a lot of that growth, I'm sad to say, if you're not worried yet, does not come in the associate ranks. But I am optimistic. And truly, and you should be optimistic. This is a great time to be a lawyer. The problems in the world are desperate for your help. And it's a great, well, anyway, not a great enough time for me to renew my license, but a great time. Great time to be a lawyer. Right. So, the third secular change that's coming, and this is so far off that this may just be of some academic interest to you, is that the nature of partnership, I think, has changed and probably changed irrevocably. And I tell you about this partially so I can inform you that there's a pulling up the ladder effect at the places where you're about to go. And second, that when you see as a 2L or a 3L after you start, these very sad looking, very anxious looking partners, you may understand better why. There was this revolution of rising expectations that I showed you earlier, the Bill Henderson graphic. Here's another graph. This is not held constant in inflationary terms. These are just constant dollars. This shows you the growth in net operating income, which is divided by the number of partners to get profits per partner, between 2004 and 2008. It then begins to slow down, goes up a little bit by 2013. That's the heavy purple line. The slanted lines are the growth rates looking from 2007 where the partners would be in 2013 if the music hadn't stopped, if the various scams that they helped perpetrate on Wall Street had continued, if the bubble didn't burst. My God, they'd have more acreage on Nantucket. Well, so they don't, and the world continues to spin. But when you grow up thinking like that, and if that's your norm, you can be disappointed. The other thing that you need to know, and this I just off topic, but it took me a few years before I figured it out in this job, and I offer it to you now. Why were so many lawyers that I was meeting when I first took this job, so many successful partners, why would they all describe themselves as upper middle class? Upper middle class. You know, they were all making 7 figures. They all had several bedroom apartments in Manhattan. They were sending their children to private schools so exclusive that guys like me couldn't even know their names. How is this possible? It's possible because of the people they're rubbing up against. The investment bankers, the traders, the darlings who run their hedge funds without any insider trading in Greenwich, Connecticut. Those people have vast sums of money. Without, there wasn't even an allegation. Those people have vast sums of money. And if that's who you're associating with day in and day out, when your SAT scores were 5 or 10 or even 25 points higher than theirs, and yet you have to live in a 3-bedroom with an apartment on the Upper West Side with a doorman who's a little shady, you might feel that you're only upper middle class. So understand this. Is this okay?
Yeah, no. That's totally accurate.
Right, okay, so I just saved you six weeks of lunches with unhappy partners. Okay, so what is happening in large law firm land? How is it possible that the equity partners, also known as owners, have managed to maintain their profit margins and their control over their situation? Well, they've done it largely by pulling up the ladder. Between 2008 and 2013, the number of equity partners in the AmLaw 200 grew by 1%. The size of the law firm partnership, the number of people called partners grew considerably, but most of them, 78% growth, were people in the non-equity partner ranks. People called partners, very fine lawyers. The rest of the world, nobody would know if they're owners or not, but they are they aren't owners, and therefore they don't get to share in all of the riches.
They're partners.
They're partners,
Partners,
right.
without the P for profit.
Yeah.
Hashtag art.
He said that, right. And so in the process, even in this slow growth period, leverage increased from 2.58 to 1 to 3.08 to 1. You understand leverage in another unkind world referred to as a pyramid scheme, where people on the bottom work very hard and funnel their excess profits up into the ownership class. So to be Churchillian, as I think one of the slides said, never have so many work so hard for so few, for the benefit of so few. Another line that just I didn't deliver very well. Anyway, so some partners now, it turns out, are much more equal than others. Back in the day, when all the partners were on a lockstep schedule, which is to say partners of a certain level were all paid essentially the same, and this notion of being paid meritocratically or on an eat-what-you-kill basis was frowned upon. The gap between the best paid and the lowest paid owner-partner was roughly 3 to 1. Now, as you can see, we surveyed the MLaw 200, 107 responded. The overall average is 10 to 1. Another reason why there is some unhappiness in the partner ranks. When you're making 10 times what the fellow next to you or next to you is making, that can cause some dissension in the ranks. It doesn't have to. There are great law firms in this country where there is wildly divergent gaps in what partners make. They have very strong cultures. They have other ways of showing respect to each other besides money. At some places that don't have those strong cultures, this can be a cancer. Or a place where one partner tells another in the famous way that children are sometimes raised because I said so. So, in the midst of all of this, we have a surge of lateral activity. Once upon a time, partners like professors came and stayed forever. Those days are over. Roughly 2,000 partners, people with partner category classification move in and out of the MLaw 200 each year. They've done this every year since we began counting in 2000. It's a great time for those of you who end up deciding you don't want to be a practicing lawyer. It's very important that you make a lot of friends, particularly here, but also in your first few years at law firms. So if you have the taste for doing recruiting, great time to not only be a lawyer, but also to be a legal recruiter. Not your father's partnership, not a sexist remark. In our father's generation, there was so few women partners. Oh. I'm not hearing this. 10 years ago, I listened as the head of a major American law firm, one of the 10 biggest law firms, screamed at one of my reporters, and I was across the room, but I could hear it coming out of his voice. How dare you write a story that we were de-equitizing some of our partners? De-equitizing, do you all know what that means? Right, going from ownership to non-ownership class, becoming a partner. 10 years ago, it wasn't talked about. Last year, when we did our annual survey of the MLaw 200 managing partners, we asked them, how many of you plan to de-equitize partners this year? 53%. More chilling, how many of you plan to ask partners to leave? If I could have figured out how to match it up nicely, one of them would have been the de-equitization strategy, the other would be the defenestration strategy. 85%. 85% of the people who answered said that they were going to be forcing out or asking one of their partners to leave or not. Really quite a remarkable change in the nature of common brotherhood of man and fatherhood of God. Now, last point, and then we'll get on to the really interesting stuff. The big firm market is segmenting in ways that will seem obvious once I lay it out for you, but it's important for you to have some granular knowledge about it because we and most people tend to emphasize the gargantuan and the gargantuan is not, even in the big firm world, all that accurate. Headcount has grown, but as I said to you earlier, if you leave out these 6 Bahrain firms, since 2008, 190 firms, 1,800 more lawyers. Look at the average size of the AmLaw 200. 612. Now these are major institutions at 612, but 80 firms have 500 or fewer lawyers. Most of these firms operate in a handful of cities. There are a fair number of them, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, that are, have as many embassies as the Jesuits, but that's not the norm. The reason that we and everybody else write about them so much is that they're unusual and outsized. Now, to be fair, 500 lawyers is a lot of lawyers. You all know about Latham & Watkins, a wonderful law firm, that do a lot of pro bono work, have great clients. One of the 2 most successful law firms in the country financially, by some measures, for the global law firms of their size. The head of that law firm, many times removed, Jack Walker, presided over the nationalization and then the beginning of the globalization of the firm. So they went from essentially being a Los Angeles-based firm to being a firm in 22, 18 cities around the nation and around the world. So I asked Jack one day, as he was playing golf very well and I was playing golf really miserably, which is the only way I know how to play golf. But I get invited back a lot by these guys to play golf with them because I'm so bad that and they are so good that they take a certain amount of pleasure in watching my struggle. So I said to Jack, at what point did you go from being a firm where everybody knew each other to this distended, sort of held together by rubber bands institutions? And Jack said that's exactly the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, what was the seminal point? What was the pivot point where we went from a firm where we were a band of brothers, and they were all men in those days, to this other thing? And I said, okay, Jack, as is frequently the case when I'm talking to lawyers, I love it when they say to me, well, here's what you mean to be asking. No, actually, schmuck, this is what I meant to be asking. Like, but okay, Jack, we're on the golf course. I just slugged another shot. So let me rephrase that question for you. Right? What's the answer? And the answer was when we went from 1 floor in Los Angeles to 2 floors. When they all didn't see each other every day, didn't bump into each other on the way to the men's room or on the way to the car park. That was the change. The rest after that was just variations on the theme. Jack is one of the smartest law firm guys I know, and very nice. That doesn't mock my golf very much at all. And I took that as very serious advice. You're still doing okay?
Yep.
Yeah, good. I need positive reinforcement.
Like every other lawyer.
Yes, why didn't I practice? America did not need another mediocre lawyer. So, as you can see from this effort at creative PowerPointing, there is no one strategy in terms of growth since the recession. An absolutely even split among the firms that have been on the AmLaw 200 consistent each year since 2008, up, down, flat. Among the 21 most profitable, who we'll get to in a few minutes, also an almost even split. Now, in terms of gross revenue, there's a wild variation between those firms above $1 billion and those firms at $500 million or less. One interesting fact is that the biggest firm is 25 times the size of the smallest, and the average is $482 million. Segmented by reach. You cannot go on a AmLaw 200 website, although I haven't been on all of them in the last week, without being told that you are visiting the website of a global law firm. All of them have global clients because all of their clients have some global interests. Most law firms, however, are not playing aggressively on the global stage, despite what they will tell you. Yes, 20% of all AmLaw 200 lawyers are based outside the United States, but 10 firms account for 2/3 of them, and 6 firms account for half. Of all the firms that have foreign offices, 49% have 4 or fewer. If you look at reach, there are these giants with 15 plus, but most firms have that office, the proverbial man and dog in London. One, and sometimes not the dog. One office, sometimes successful, sometimes frequently not. It allows them to be to consider themselves global, often open, pursuing a client that they were trying to help and hoping that they would expand from there on. This is important to you. Some of you are multilingual, have interest in cross-border transactions or litigation disputes. It is the future. It is incredibly exciting. If you want to do that work, go to places that are built to do that work. I mean, everybody does so. There's a brilliant M&A partner, well, there are many brilliant M&A partners at Wachtell Lippin, but there's one in particular, David Katz, who has a huge M&A practice in Paris. He gets on airplanes, he's back and forth all the time. Most people who want to have a practice in France need, the proverbial boots on the ground. So don't be shy about asking these questions, and find out who and how the place is run. If it's a historically London operation, historically New York operation, find out when the next chairperson, not from one of those places, is going to show up. Find out what the rotation system is. Can you get ahead in that law firm if you only work out of the Tbilisi office? Or do they expect you to work out of Rio and Beijing and Paris as well? No right or wrong, it just tells you whether they're truly international institutions or not. Sorry, I'm moving into my career counseling mode, I gotta get out. A small number of very large firms, it's essentially 10 that have 2/3 of the lawyers abroad. You can't possibly absorb all of this, but if any of you want the slides, happy to send it to you. Now, segmented by profitability. This is the golden quadrant, number 1. 21 law firms with profits per partner of $2 million or more and revenue per lawyer of $1 million or more. What do they have in common? All but one of them have major New York operations. All of them have focus. They know what they're doing, and they don't try to do everything for everyone. They only play at the top of their markets. They tend to be hard places to get jobs at, certainly very hard places to succeed at. They hire disproportionately from places like Harvard. They may or may not be the right place for you, but these 21 firms all have futures. There will be a few others who move up into that quadrant 1 over the next few years, but if you're looking for security for the next 7 or 8 years, you don't have to worry about those 21 firms going out of business. These firms increased their lead in the post-recession, post-Lehman Brothers period. The orange dots are where each group stood in 2008. The blue dots where they stood in 2013. Only one group moved appreciably ahead, the top 21. This is just lawyer porn, where each of the firms moved. I apologize for the arrow, but it is what it is. Now, we come to the interesting stuff. And I've got, how much time? 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to be very, very quick about this, and maybe I won't even do PowerPoints because that's going to just slow me down. So the three things that you should be prepared for as you go forward. The first one having to do with your work. Lawyers, and correctly so, think of a lot of what they do as being artistic. Same root as artisanal, things that are created from scratch each time, a great deal of pride of authorship. Clients don't like that so much. If you've figured out how to do something once, they don't want you to start from scratch the second time. There's a fellow over at Harvard Medical School named Atul Gawande. His last book was called not his last book, the book before last was called The Checklist, where he talked about how far medicine has come in the 20th, 21st century by having things like checklists in surgical suites, so that the surgeon would have to check off the little box that said he had washed his hands at Johns Hopkins Hospital before he was allowed to operate, and there was a small person standing in front of him, frequently female, but not always, who was there to thwart him before he could march in and do his thing. No check, no knife. No knife, oh my goodness. So, having done that for a few years, mortality at Johns Hopkins went way down. I understand I'm only talking about healthcare here. Nothing incredibly complicated and really vital, and each one different, like a mezzanine financing. Right. You've been there. Well, I'm telling you all of this because there is going to be great pressure in your careers over the next 5, 10, 15 years to routinize that which can be routinized, so that people like yourselves and your seniors who have extraordinary brain power, creativity, and energy can devote yourselves to the work with the knife, the work with the scalpel, and not having to do all the routine work that can either be left to cheaper providers or perhaps someday to machines, which I will come to in a second. Your measures. You all are going to be working for people who work in corporations, your clients work in corporations that are metric soaked. I apologize, Heidi, but if this is a slur on all business school trained people, but there's this mania in American corporate life in measuring everything. And if it can't be measured, they're absolutely certain that it isn't worthwhile. And if it can be measured, they're absolutely certain it can be done cheaper and better. This, of course, to use the technical term, is crap. Nonetheless, that's the way your clients are going to be thinking. So, at some point, they're going to think that way about their lawyers. And what measures do law firms give their clients now? 1, rates times hours. Well, that's going to be driven down. What about measuring responsiveness, skill, interpersonal relations, quality of experience, any number of things? No, soft, no, not going to do it. I invite you to think about this as you go forward, as you talk with your seniors and as you talk with your clients. Are there not ways that we should be assessed differently than simply rates times hours? Because rates times hours, despite everything I've said up until now, except for those 21 law firms and a handful of partners at each of the other 194, is a losing game. The third thing that I will say, and this one because it's cute, is Dr. Watson. So you all know about Watson, who first beat Kasparov. It wasn't called Watson, it was called something else.
Deep Blue.
Deep Blue, thank you. Then went on Jeopardy and won on Jeopardy. Now, IBM is force-feeding Dr. Watson every medical textbook, journal, article ever written, in the hopes that Watson can take all this information and spit it back out to clinicians, to practitioners, in a way that no busy practitioner could possibly keep up with. That's medicine. Right behind that, they're going to start working on law, or they've started working on law. This is the mirage, the dream of artificial intelligence. When and how it arrives, I hope to have my feet up with a nice pina colada before it shows up. But sometime in your careers it will. The last thing I want to say to you, and even just give me a minute before you leave, because I won't feel, I failed. I won't feel that I've done my job if I don't. All I've done today is talk to you about business. You're not just entering business. If you want to make money, if you just want to make money, get the hell out of here and go if you can get in to Harvard Business School. Those boys and girls will help you make money. You're going to enter a profession, and a profession has obligations to this country, to the society, to people who can't afford you. If all you do as lawyers is serve your paying clients, you're missing the point. You have an obligation. You, from Harvard Law School, of all places, have an obligation at your law firms, in your own practices, at your corporations, when you go in-house, to serve the greater good. That's part of the lawyer's obligation, has been from the beginning. And I ask you, I invite you as a citizen and a fan and an optimist to please take that work seriously. If any of you ever need any help from me, or if I can answer any questions, my second year, when my daughter was a second year at NYU, she came to me and said, "Daddy, it's on-campus interviewing season. Do you know anything about any of these law firms?" I've been waiting 25 years to say, "Rebecca, of all the gin joints in all the world, walk into the right one." Use me as a resource. If you don't want to send me an official email, I'm at aricpress@yahoo.com. I'm the last guy in the world to use Yahoo. ARICPRESS@yahoo.com. I'd be more than happy to guide you in any way I can. I thank you very much for your kind attention. This has been a pleasure for me.
Comments?
Could you talk about your role as you say a journalist, legal journalist? It would seem to me, just having come from the big law, and we watch in this country right now all the sort of politics of what people say and do, whether it's sexual harassment, homophobia, out and out racism, or some kind of despicable act by a corporate CEO. We rarely hear about it in law firms until it's a crime. And so, do you feel as a legal journalist we do a good job focusing on the actual behavior of leaders of these big institutions? Because they stick around a long time, but we don't hear about the kind of character and behavior of these men and women, well, by and large men, who run these firms. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I mean, there's I suppose, empirical question of how much bad behavior is there in law firms worth writing about, probably more than we know about, and how much of it is newsworthy. The question, when there are substantive, bad behavior that we can report out and prove, we don't hesitate to write about it. They're lawyers. They occasionally. They lose their minds and run off with the very attractive spouse of one of their junior partners. And sometimes, if it's a law firm that has issues, that finds its way into the public press. And sometimes there's a who cares factor. Lawyers who steal, we don't hear about that much. When it enters when it gets to the indictment stage, it becomes irresistible. Maybe we should be more aggressive in finding that stuff. It's a worthy. I don't know the answer to your question. We don't lack for trying. There's been a certain devaluation of gossip in recent years. So much of it is cheap, and maybe it's because I'm getting older, I don't care about it. Serious stuff we would write about and do. Why we don't find out about it earlier? We just need better sources. Woodward and Bernstein, great as they were, to use an old cultural reference, they needed somebody to talk about it. And it's not. Yeah. Anyway, does that address your question, sort of?
It does.
Yes, ma'am.
Question, just someone, former journalist myself. Do you think that the perception of lawyers in general is being affected by all of the new TV shows and movies that are coming out with kind of this negative perspective, as you will, on the profession, like that new show that just came out, Get Away with Murder, those type of things? And do you think that that's having an effect on how clients are responding necessarily to lawyers, because they kind of see them from this place of the almighty, they just want my dollars, they just want my money, they're not in it for justice or for my benefit as so much as it is for money?
It's a very interesting question. I'm not sure I know the answer. There are two different groups of clients. There are consumer clients and business clients. I think it's more likely to be true with consumer clients than with sophisticated business clients. But I think the status of lawyers, a bit like the status of members of Congress. Everybody hates members of Congress, but actually kind of likes their own. I think there's something like that with lawyers as well, frankly. Although recently I had experience with one of my lawyers who I was wondering why he was essentially reading me a legal memo rather than getting to the point. I knew he was smart. What do I do with this problem? Kind of thing. But that's not what you're asking. We go through cycles, and it's entertainment. Yes, ma'am.
So in master thinking, issuers against the law firm in the world, the speaker said in the corporation law firm, everything customer said, client said is right. So that's what we should try to do in the law firm if we want to go to a conference. Do you think that should be confused by what you said? It's different from business rules, so we should have responsibility to the country or know what is right and wrong. So how does that work?
I mean, the two former big firm lawyers here actually should speak to that. From my vantage point as a client and as a citizen, I have found it more valuable when a lawyer has said, no, you can't do this, or yes, you can do it, but if you do it, here are some very serious risks, either legal or reputational, that you're running. Unlike what was the famous J.P. Morgan, who said, I don't need a lawyer to tell me no, I just need a lawyer to tell me yes. I'm ruining that quote. I've never thought that was very valuable. I mean, what lawyers are supposed to counsel, and counsel doesn't just mean saying yes.
Yeah, but in reality, I went to some big New York museum when the head of the museum in New York, her lawyer said actually his work is what her lawyer do is just to make the law, to see how to create the work, to do what the president said, or the museum said he could make it work. But that's the reality, right?
Well, I want to be careful with this. Lawyers are part of their obligation to the client is to facilitate their wishes, but within boundaries. Lawyers, and maybe I'm just painfully naive, are private law enforcers, as well as being advisors to clients. So it's a complicated set of circumstances, but I don't think the only answer to a client is we'll figure out how you can do this, because sometimes it's inappropriate or wrong or risky. And sometimes, I suppose, the lawyer may have to withdraw if it's
such a clear, because there'll be plenty of others who'll do the work. But seriously, I think the lawyer has obligations to the client, but also to the broader system.
Well, actually, it's going to change the subject before you leave.
Oh.
Can I just?
Yep, I think we've got time for one more question, actually. So if you want to make a comment or a question.
Are you left hanging, or are you all right?
Better.
Better. Okay.
I was just going to put you on the spot on the subject of women and what's your most recent take on that, given the relatively grim numbers, the equitization and all that stuff, pulling up the ladder, and the fact that women are still at about 15% equity partners when they were not a whole lot worse than that 30 years ago.
The numbers are accurate. Some firms try very hard. Some firms don't try at all. It's an odd time in that, given how easy it is for at most firms to promote people into non-equity partner status, that more firms don't take advantage of that to promote more women into that status, particularly women who are trying the juggling act of raising children, managing a home, and having a successful career, almost as a kind of way station on the route to the period when the kids are grown. And but it's not an argument I've had much luck convincing many people about. Look, these are difficult. These large firms are difficult institutions. They're not friendly. They're not particularly family friendly for men or women, for fathers or mothers. There's a lot of compromise that has to be made in order to succeed at them, I think. Sometimes good compromises, and other times ones that people might regret.
Well, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grace. Sure. Introduce myself, Brad. I'm a student at the and it's great. Yeah, it's been a fantastic class right now. Where we're
Thank you guys.
Yeah. So whether she's probably not about metrics.
So I guess we're not having that meeting too.
Very briefly. Very helpful.
Right, we know
Maybe it's coming back and then
I can send you an email.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd be very happy to do it. When is your project? Great. I'm on the road every day but Friday this week, and next week's a bad week, but after that I free up.
I'm totally
I'd be very happy.
I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You were great. You didn't get it. I was going to ask you the partnership contingent on the specialty, because I've dealt with intellectual property and patent law, and that's a very different field. So contingent on the specialty and where their partner can make a major difference in how well they do it. And then also, I know, do you travel to the third tier law schools and the second tiers? Because I know they're the ones who've been adversely affected post 2008 and 2009. So it's a different story for them.
It is a different story for them because those institutions aren't feeding the great big law firms.
Right.
It never
were.
were.
Ivies are the ones always using that. Right.
Really good.
Okay, good. But no, thank you. And I'm going to jump into the great.
Before you get there, before you have children, before you get
great presentation.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, it's important. These are numbers that people have to hear and live with.
And I'm going to head back up there, okay?
I would have answered Betsy's question with the Latin phrase res ipsa loquor.
Yeah.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah,
Part of the problem is, look, I was at Greenberg Traurig for 7 years. They don't get much bigger and uglier than that. And
It's a tough case.
and when you showed that statistics on my I remember sitting on a shareholder conference call hearing about a lateral we had hired from Nixon Peabody, who was about to be indicted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles because he was caught redacting SEC documents. There's an article, I think, either in one of your magazines, that asked the Nixon and Peabody managing partner here in Boston, what did you know and when did you know it? And he said, we had no idea when he left the firm that he was this person.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. That was great.
Oh, thank
you
you.
so much for that.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. You guys enjoy lunch. Sorry I can't make it. I gotta go upstairs and got a phone call at 1:30. So
Okay.
I'll be back by 2:30.
Okay, sounds great. Really enjoy it.
They had to know. We know that. We know when we have bad people in our firms.
Yeah.
And when we say, when you showed that statistic, 85% of people are going to ask partners to leave. Some of the people who are going to ask to leave are bad actors.
Yeah.
But we don't read about them in the papers.
Sure.
When somebody says, you know, when you have a managing partner, I mean, look, Greenberg at the end, and one of the reasons I left practice to go into academia, I represented a bunch of schools of colleges. I remember 3 years ago, just as I was leaving, we were getting sued by one of our partners in our Philadelphia office for a class act. She wanted to file a class act. I'm sure you heard of this. This is in all the newspapers and magazines. Because she said that the firm was biased against women.
Oh, yes, we were.
And Michael Lair, who was our regional managing partner, he was one of the four, tall Jewish guy, and I know Michael all 7 years. He walked into her office and said, well, it's true, only tall Jewish guys make money at Greenberg Trailer. Michael, if they'd put me on the stand,
Oh my God.
I said, of course he said it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what Michael says.
Yeah. Right.
We know, but that kind of culture, you know, Richard Rosenbaum is no peach. He wouldn't be stupid enough to say something like that. But in a firm like that, you have actors who run around the country saying horrible, terrible things. And making decisions about advancement. I have no doubt, now she was one woman in the Philadelphia office, she happened to work in his office. But I have no doubt, you look at the executive committee at Greenberg prior to this case, there was one woman.
That wasn't an accident.
It wasn't an accident. I mean, Cesar Alvarez and Richard Rosenbaum and those characters in Miami, and because they are characters.
They are characters. I know Caesar very well and admire what he did.
Sure, but the culture is something it's hard to get into. I would bet if we opened up the emails and we heard some of the conversations that we have in partnership, they're far worse than what happened with the LA Clippers.
That has to, or at least as bad.
Right, and we're not going to fire any of those people. And some of them represent some of the biggest companies in America.
I had this mortifying discussion recently with a good friend of mine who was chief administrator to
Just naturally segregate
who had just come back from a client.
Okay. Oh, you're doing Bill Hader's Harvard?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's
that program.
You're in it again.
And the client was so my friend said to me,
Yes.
"I build this
And not just the plan.
That's right.
we might lose the client.
I'd love to just say
Christy
hello. I just read your writing and greatly admire your work.
Berkshire Les is part of our outside editing team for our upcoming Practice Digital magazine, which will not give you a run for your money, but it's a different thing.
We need competition.
It's a
No,
different
but
kind of
we're
magazine.
definitely learning from you.
Yes.
Oh, well, great.
Who are going into
That's very
summer
sweet of you to say. My day is just
And
We should get
You
going for
turned
lunch.
Mary Lawyer into a
well.
Did we come to lunch?
Oh, right, now let me just finish my thought.
Continue.
Coaching
Yeah.
them.
It's a real pleasure to meet you. No, I'm writing and editing, so I'm a career writer and editor. 20 years. So, yeah.
A good thing to be.
Yeah, and I've worked
Into the work with them. And mainly, I
politics and academia, so,
because they cannot march.
they asked me to help them.
Great.
Or
Well,
let's put it the other way.
the world is more.
We can.
Well, it's figured out the sense that we're going to be able to
If you see anything I can do better, please let me know. I will knock on the door.
I feel like I'm picking up tips from
So the
a
link,
real
we
master.
gave
You're a great writer.
Thank you.
And, that's such a nice,
That's a nice
it's, well, it's,
Fascinating. things, but
As I
if they didn't
work
take
on
accounting
material
in the capital markets,
doesn't happen so often.
then they're gonna be behind.
Data.
And that's why Milbank at
Words
Tweed,
that are
Milbank
actually
at
hard to
Tweed.
read.
That's what Milbank at Harvard.
You know.
is such a brilliant decision.
Yes, it can be a challenge.
Uh,
Try not to take on subjects that don't lend themselves to that.
And those are the models I'm searching for, so anyway.
Okay.
Don't get
So we're gonna go have a nice lunch?
Great, great,
Treat you
great.
to lunch?
Oh, thank you.
Betsy, yes, Kristen.
Unless they know what to expect and they come in thinking that
Betsy's last.
That's essential.
You know,
And now,
you
for
and
even
you
our
double up.
program, less
She's
than-
around.
All right.
She's great.
See you soon.
Well, I'm sure if we get it. Brad Scott and.
They closed the, they closed the.
Glad you're doing that program.
I'm just, I'm actually.
Which one?
So,
What am Yeah.
it's kind of like a process.
Yeah, what do you do?
Oh, you are? Did you just, oh, are you the writer? I met you. I remember meeting you.
We're all kind of on it.
Back at the,
Like reinvent law one.
There's this way back.
The future of the profession.
Yeah.
I remember very well.
what's your name again?
My course never bring enough cards, but I think this is one. I'm almost ready. That's good. There you go. That's an old card too.
And this is your poster.
Give me a call.
That's lunch.
I'm just down the street, so I live here in Cambridge. So.
You live with your magazine
Beach of Heart for years.
They're very, I mean, obviously.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're heading out to lunch?
Yeah.